Hello there, welcome back everyone. How are you? I hope you had a good week. Well, pleasantries over, let's get to the good stuff. As I'm sure you all know, because you have been watching my channel steadily, waiting with bated breath until the next video comes out. I know that's what you've been doing. Anyway, I've been doing a series on watching every single movie in the Turner Classics movie collection, because I'm certifiable. Single-minded, I like to call it, and dedicated to the cause. Of course, me being me, I've got to do it my own way and watch them backwards. Not literally the movies backwards, but the collection backwards. And it being streaming, I have to take the movies as they are added because they can't put all the movies on at once. I don't know why, but there it is. So I started from Z going backwards, and I am up through the T's currently. But since they keep adding more movies, I have to go back and catch up. That's what this video is about. We are going Z through T, catching up. So here we go. First up, Taxi, 1932, directed by Roy Del Ruth. Starring James Cagney and Loretta Young. I didn't know she started acting that early. It's another early pre-code film which is not very long, just over an hour. Cagney and his buddy, George E. Stone. I recognize this guy from The Racket, which is an Oscar nominee from one of my recent videos. They are cab drivers who are being set upon by the evil cab conglomerate. And Young's father, played by Guy Kibbe, is also one, and he gets attacked and ends up committing inadvertent manslaughter, then dies in prison. This sets up a far more complicated plot than actually ensues. The plot of the movie ends up being mainly about Cagney's violent tendencies and how even the love of a good woman isn't enough to curb them. It's so of its time. And Young's even about to walk out on Cagney at the end, but she accepts him back because he's her man, and there is love and all that kind of crap. Sadly, this movie is not particularly interesting or memorable. Taxi Driver, 1976, directed by Martin Scorsese, starring Robert De Niro and Jodie Foster. This is also an early appearance for Harvey Keitel, quite a surprise. I watched this last year just by chance, and it was a good movie. It's nice to see the context for all the famous lines and etc., etc. I really, really liked it until the ending. What the heck? Here, right here is where it should have ended. The denouement seemed tacked on, and there was no real punishment for the character. Now, you can argue until doomsday whether he was justified in his actions or no, but when you come down to it, he committed freaking homicide, which last I checked was against the law. It just, it didn't fit. I feel it would have worked better if, like, the ending had been all in his head. Was it supposed to be? Did I miss something? Because it didn't play out that way. The Thin Man Goes Home, 1944, directed by Richard Thorpe. Starring, of course, William Powell and Myrna Loy. This is a charming addition to the Thin Man series. Nick and Nora go back to Nick's hometown to spend some time with his parents, and predictably they run into a mystery to solve. This is one of those with so many known actors popping up. Gloria DeHaven, Donald Meek, Lucille Watson, Maury Ankrum, and Meet Me in St. Louis family members Harry Davenport and Leon Ames. Those are all just the ones who caught my eye. This is still funny in many ways, although again, we have a part where Nick smacks Nora with a newspaper. I repeat, casual violence against women was a common trope back then and was often even played for laughs. Overall, though, this is one where you can curl up in a blanket and watch it for comfort. It's even got the common Thin Man and Other Mysteries trope where the detective gathers all the suspects together in one room at the end. That's not realistic in the least, but I love it so. And my kids really like the smart little doggy. So this one was largely a winner. Torrid Zone, 1940, directed by William Cayley, starring James Cagney and Anne Sheridan.
Billed by Max as a comedy, but it's more a drama set in tropical climes, as was popular at the time. See The Letter or To Have and Have Not for examples of films that pulled it off a little better than this one. Ann Sheridan is a singer and card sharp who gets mixed up with Cagney. Cagney has been hired by Pat O'Brien to oversee a banana plantation and defend it against bandits. Now, George Tobias, who I never realized was such a character actor or that he was in so many Cagney films, he plays, of all things, a Latino revolutionary. Brownface aside, he and Sheridan seem to be having the most fun in this movie, and that's even considering the fact that it has the always endearing Andy Devine, and also one of my personal faves, Jerome Cohen, in supporting roles. This is another one it's more miss than hit. It's not too memorable. 2 O'Clock Courage, 1945, directed by Anthony Mann, starring Tom Conway and Anne Rutherford. A man with amnesia gets picked up by a lady cab driver who becomes his girl Friday and helps him to piece together the mystery of his missing memories, which it transpires involve murder, because of course they do. The action takes place over a few hours in one night. As a whole, this movie works quite well, even though it seems more like a radio play than a movie. I wonder if it was quite possible at that time. Conway is engaging and likable, and Rutherford's enthusiasm is easy to get caught up in. The solution to the mystery is more complicated than necessary, but this is not the sort of film that calls you to take it too seriously. This is a small gem that doesn't ask much of its viewer, and in return it's easy to enjoy on its own terms. Vengeance Valley, 1951, directed by Richard Thorpe, starring Burt Lancaster and Joanne Drew, she of the sharp cheekbones. Seriously, you could slice yourself open on one of those things. Lancaster and Hitchcock alum Robert Walker are, respectively, the foster and biological sons of a ranch owner. Lancaster is also the foreman, and Walker is jealous. Basically, the plot is Walker ends up doing more and more dumb things and ends up being ended by the reluctant and remorseful Lancaster. Neat thing, really the only one, about this film, there's a gal who has a baby out of wedlock. She won't tell who the father is, and although some of the town talks, she is largely treated with respect by Lancaster and by proxy the movie, which is pretty cool for 1951. But overall, again, this film is nothing to write home about. The Verdict, 1946, directed by Don Siegel, starring Sidney Greenstreet and Peter Lorre. This also stars Joan Loring, and I mention that because you remember my last video on the TCM collection, right? Of course you do. But I'll just recap for the heck of it. The film Three Strangers came out in 1946, and also, in addition to Geraldine Fitzgerald, that starred Sidney Greenstreet, Peter Lorre, and Joan Loring. What a contract! This one is really neat, and I liked it a little better than Three Strangers. Greenstreet is a police inspector who fingers a man who gets put on death row for murder. Once the man is executed, it turns out that Greenstreet got the wrong guy. He resigns his position, which gets taken over by George Coulouris, a delight here and a bit of a break from straight-up villain roles. When an acquaintance of Greenstreet's gets murdered, he attempts to find redemption by trying to solve that murder before Coulouris. He is assisted more or less by artist Peter Lorre, who is again romantically paired with Loring. There is some delightful banter there. I couldn't figure out the ending until it arrived, and while I wasn't absolutely convinced by the plot as a whole, I still enjoyed it. This one is slightly above 2 O'Clock Courage, a perhaps not realistic murder mystery, but is still darn good fun. Vivacious Lady, 1938. Directed by George Stevens, starring Ginger Rogers and James Stewart. Stewart meets singer Rogers in a nightclub and marries her after one evening of whirlwind romance. They then go back to his small town where he can resume work as a professor at the family-owned college. His dad, however, is a stick in the mud, so instead of telling him right away of their nuptials, Rogers masquerades as a student in Stewart's class, and hilarity ensues. Yes, this is a screwball comedy, which is still quite funny in many ways, and it's also got a good heart. Rogers and Stewart are convincing enough as a young couple in love. And the incomparable Beulah Bondi does an amazing turn as Stewart's mother, who, it is revealed, has a wild side that has been stifled throughout her marriage. It's interesting to note that, at one point, Stewart rebels against his father by getting publicly drunk in front of his class. Instead of getting fired, he gets to keep his job. He is, after all, a white male with a strong social position. The thing, however, that brings this movie down is our old pal that we've long since disowned, most of us at least, racist portrayals. Now, once more, you recall my last go-round of the TCM collection, of course you do. The film Thank Your Lucky Stars had a segment with an all-black cast, and I called out the actor Willie Best. Now, look at this guy. Young, handsome, with screen presence. He could have been the next Denzel or Michael B. Jordan of his day, but no. In order to keep getting work, he lowered his standards and ended up playing pretty much every single black person archetype in the book. He was even given the nickname of Sleep and Eat. Yeah, I'm not kidding. I'm not blaming him in the least. The poor guy clearly just wanted a career so badly that he took whatever work there was. But he deserved far, far better. It's just cruel to see. Wagons West, 1952, directed by Ford Beebe, starring Rod Cameron and Peggy Castle. This was a monogram picture, and if you're an old Hollywood aficionado, you know just what that means. In the hierarchy of companies, monogram was pretty far down there. This is a basic programmer, with Cameron's hired cowpuncher joining a wagon train to keep order and uncovering a plot to sell weapons to certain bad actors, not a double meaning, the acting wasn't too bad on the whole, in a native tribe. Overall, it wasn't too bad for what it was. Cameron did a fine job, and my youngest kiddo who watched a bit of it liked the fact that there was a smart, brave, although here, yes, definitely not a great actor, young kid in the film. This is a curiosity, but it's nothing more than that. Westbound, 1958, directed by Bud Betticher, starring Randolph Scott and Virginia Mayo. As I mentioned last time, you recall, the streaming collection got an influx of westerns recently, particularly of the Randolph Scott variety. Most of them are not memorable on the whole and blend into each other. This one is a bit above the fray. Scott and a young buddy are soldiers returning to Colorado from the Civil War. Scott finds out area stagecoaches are being attacked, and he helps his young friend and the young friend's wife set up a coach stop at their farm. Mayo is an old flame whose husband is mixed up with the bad guys. However, there are a few cool twists to this one which I wasn't expecting, and it helped keep my interest. It didn't end at all as I expected. I would definitely recommend this one to check out, even if Karen Steele is distracting, to me not in a good way. It's not the poor girl's fault, but her look is 50s and incongruous. Apparently they had push-up bras back in the Old West, who knew? Westward, The Women, 1951, directed by William Wellman, starring Robert Taylor and Denise Darcel. Okay, I've got some things to say, so buckle up. First off, Max doesn't seem particularly enthused about this film. The thumbnail is just a random still from the movie with the title slapdashed onto it, and the title isn't even right. They put Westward the Woman, singular. So I did not have high hopes for this one. I thought, oh, another churn 'em out western with a foreign gal who they were trying to make into the next big Hollywood thing, which didn't catch on, as sadly happens so often. I was so wrong. So much about this film. Okay, I'll start from the plot. Taylor is hired as leader of a group of men hired to bring good women, i.e. not prostitutes, on the arduous journey to the working men of California as to become their wives. A large group of women in Chicago responds to the notice, including 2 actual prostitutes who kind of sneak their way in. Taylor is at first skeptical of decent women's abilities to take care of themselves on the rough trails, as only a few initially show they are capable of self-defense. Still, they start on their way. For various reasons, the other men in the group drop off. Some are fired due to misconduct, and others leave because they see this as unfair treatment. A few more get killed, eventually leaving only Taylor and the cook as the only men in the group. Thusly, the women do end up largely having to fend for themselves, as they encounter one hardship after another. Sadly, no dysentery, but believe me, the Oregon Trail's got nothing on this. Not all of the women make it through either, but eventually the group comes through to find much-deserved happiness at the end of it all. Now, that's scratching the surface. Here is what really makes it good. Skip ahead if you don't want spoilers. It's that good that you might want to do that, again, if you don't want spoilers. When we first meet the women, and they learn what they're in for. Now, it's not like they're itching for hardship, and who knows how their new husbands will treat them. But let's be real, women at that point, even white ones, didn't have many options available to them. Among the group are a couple of widows, one with a boy to raise, and another who is pregnant out of wedlock. The women are shown photos of the men waiting for them and get to choose who they want to marry. I repeat that. The women get to do the choosing. Then, on the trail, the gal who is pregnant falls in love with one of the fellows who's helping them. He turns out to be a good un, who not only truly loves her, he continues to stand by her when he finds out her condition. Unfortunately, he is killed en route. This is another movie with a lot of things I didn't expect. I won't go into all the deaths, though. They get a bit hard to take. There is a Japanese character, the cook, of course, but he is really not a stereotype, unless you consider the fact that he doesn't get a wife, because Asian people were considered either evil or subservient back then in Hollywood, and basically neuter. The fact that he becomes a good, solid, trusted sidekick to Taylor's imperfect foreman, and even gets a comedy bit that does not depend on racial humor, is a huge step for movies at that point. There is one joke on how long his name is, which is news to me. I thought Japanese names were actually relatively pretty short. But there is the point that at least he can write it when many of the whites are just making X's. And the actor is also Japanese. Dang! Like not just any Asian country, they actually cast a Japanese person. And as mentioned, there are the hardships. These women face so much, frequently one thing after another, and there is no attempt to soften the work they have to do just to stay alive. They go through absolute heck, and they do it largely themselves, and they become stronger for it, and Taylor becomes their ally. When they get to their destination at last, Taylor even goes to the waiting men and makes it clear that before they meet the women, they had better make sure they're ready to be worthy of what these women deserve. This movie makes it all about the gals, seeing them as humans instead of solely through a male gaze. I repeat, dang! Not only that, but said hardships coming one after another makes the film highly engrossing and suspenseful. There is one part I need to mention given current events at the time of this video. In one scene, a creek rises in the night and causes a flash flood. This was a hard scene to watch when I did so 2 months ago, and would probably be harder now. And yes, I do have to mention the one scene where Taylor and Darcel quarrel and he smacks her. Again, a very common trope in older stories. And this is exactly why it's so important to be aware of how accepted this type of thing used to be to understand why it's so wrong and why we don't do it now. That was one point out of an otherwise so excellent film that I clearly still cannot stop raving about it. I immediately got online and got the DVD. It's that good. Go watch it. Right now. Wichita, 1955. Directed by Jacques Tourneur. Starring Joel McCrea and Vera Miles. Okay, as memorable and amazing as that last movie was, this one brings us back down to earth with a not-so-memorable plot about Wyatt Earp and new acquaintance Bat Masterson reluctantly bringing law and order to the named town of the title. McCrea does a fine job, but it's just not a standout in any way. I mean, really, maybe I'm tired out after the last review, but there's really just not anything to say here. The Wizard of Oz, 1939. Directed by Victor Fleming and others, there was famously some director hopping here. Stars Judy Garland and Frank Morgan et al. Now, where do I keep coming up with these obscure films? You probably haven't even heard of this one. It's about a brave little dog coming from Kansas to a strange land, and although he has to walk most of the way, he still stands up bravely to an evil witch and boldly unmasks an imposter. Then he gets forced to go home without even getting to play with his new friend, the random crowd kitten. There are songs, there is dancing, there's a random floaty head guy who I am still waiting to be identified because I know that wasn't Frank Morgan. If anyone knows who that was, let them step forward. You'll Find Out, 1940. Directed by David Butler. Starring popular band leader Kay Kaiser and his singer at the time, Ginny Simms. Kaiser's bandmates are also in the film and play situations for laughs. It's that kind of beat picture. It's just good, clean fun for a Saturday afternoon that the kiddies can throw peanuts at while getting out of the house. The thin plot concerns Kaiser's group getting booked for a birthday party at a spooky old house on an island, which then gets cut off by a fierce storm, and all sorts of creepy stuff ensues. It's basically Scooby-Doo before Scooby-Doo, and there's even a cute doggy. It's a bit of fluff that apparently did pretty well at the box office, and also provided work for Bela Lugosi, Peter Lorre, dang, TCM got a deal on Peter Lorre this month, and Boris Karloff, who, it should come as no surprise, are the scheming villains. This also has Alma Kruger of Hitchcock's Saboteur. Look her up on Wikipedia, she was a fox in her youth. The Young Guns, 1956. Directed by Albert Band. Starring Russ Tamblyn and Gloria Talbot. That's right, I said The Young Guns. It was a shock to me too that there were two movies by that title. Although I still have not seen the 80s one, I have betrayed all of Generation X. This is notable purely for its conceit. It's a juvenile delinquency film that happens to be set in the Old West. Tamblyn is a good kid, an orphan whose father happens to have been a notorious gunslinger. As that reputation precedes him, there are many who are convinced that blood will out, and that the boy is destined to be nothing but trouble. Eventually, he gets fed up with such treatment and moves out of town to a settlement with a bad reputation, i.e., the wrong side of the tracks. There he falls in with a gang of young toughs, and he works to lead them away from trouble. It is an interesting concept, and there's a bit of nice camera work, but not really anything else here of note. The Ziegfeld Follies, 1945. Directed by Vincent Minnelli, starring Fred Astaire and Lucille Bremer. I have not watched this recently, but I didn't have to. My mom is a Fred Astaire fan, so I practically grew up with this one. There are predictably many splashy, literally, there's Esther Williams, and over-the-top musical numbers, including the Limehouse Blues featuring Yellowface L'Arg. Also, many stars of the time, including but not limited to Sid Charisse, Lucille Ball in her glamour girl phase, Keenan Wynn, Follies mainstay Fanny Bryce, Hume Cronin, Katherine Grayson, Judy Garland, the lovable Victor Moore, Gene Kelly dancing with Astaire in their only outing together, absolute queen to this day, Lena Horne, and William Powell in a very strange opener as Florin Ziegfeld directing the show from the afterlife. It's overstuffed, overlong, the comedy bits are dated, and it's still a lot of fun, with great and hummable songs. If nothing else, watch it for the wedding cake type sets and the Technicolor-worthy costumes. And lastly, Ziegfeld Girl, 1941. Directed by Busby Berkeley. Stars Lana Turner, Hedy Lamarr, and Judy Garland. It's a drama about three young ladies who become the gals of the title. Ziegfeld isn't so well known today, but he was quite the popular showman of his time. His stage works were like high-class vaudeville, featuring the hand-picked cream-of-the-crop variety acts of the day, and there were many musical numbers featuring gorgeous women in sumptuous, frequently scantily clad, even for today, costumes. It is stated early in the film that some of the gals become stars, some leave to get married, and some even get overwhelmed by it all and end up shuffling off the immortal coil far too early. Needless to say, that is a prediction that affects all three characters of the main stars. Lamarr is the reluctant Ziegfeld girl who only takes the job because her husband cannot find work. His male pride is affronted by his wife working when he is not. Horrors! And they separate. Turner gets affected by her newfound fame and puts on airs. James Stewart is, and I can't believe I'm saying this, positively annoying as her working-class trucker boyfriend who puts her down for being too big for her britches. Like, it's one show. She's young. Let her have her fun before she gets married and settles down and can't ever do anything anymore. At least she'll have a story to tell. Yeesh. Garland has the best of it all, playing her doe-eyed best as the gal raised by a single vaudevillian father who has taught her all he knows. The two of them are endlessly supportive of each other, and here come the only real emotions I felt through this film. Garland's eventual stardom is earned and deserved, even if she gets put in the silliest hats. Watch it for her, and dad actor Charles Winninger. Eve Arden does her acerbic best in The Brief Turn as well, but not really for anything else.
And that's it for another round of every movie in the Turner Classic Movies collection so far. I like to think we've all learned something today. So yes, I hope you have another good week until next time. I will see you then. Watch more movies, read more books, experience life, the good, the bad. You know, people say, oh, life is awful, life is great. Life is both good and bad. That's life. And no matter what, you learn from it. I like to think that's a plus side. Of course, I like to think there's a plus side to many things, so there we are. In any case, enough of my rambling. I will see you next week. Take care of yourselves and each other. Bye now.